and welcome to the monthly wrap-up here at Veritas. My name's Oliver Brett, and today I'll be unpacking for you the topic we discovered and looked at in April, which was all around taking back control. And what we were meaning by this and what we were looking at is manipulation in a variety of different forms and a variety of different settings. So as you'd be aware, everything we do at Veritas is looking at how certain things impact us both at work and at home, and from a well-being point of view, and also from a performance point of view. So when we were looking back at taking control, we were looking back at the relationships that we hold and how we can make sure that we keep them balanced and don't let go of, give up, or have power taken away from us, so that we're feeling like we're important, we're feeling like we've got integrity, we've got respect, and also we've got independence as well. That is, that we're able to be who we want to be, do what we want to do, whilst also functioning in a relationship one-on-one, a team at work, a relationship at work as well, and a variety of other different settings as well. And we looked at manipulation in different forms as well. So we looked at manipulation in regards to control. We looked at manipulation in regard to possessiveness. We looked at manipulation in regards to what is, I suppose, acceptable manipulation and when it goes too far, with that concept of acceptable manipulation being those things we're exposed to every single day in regards to media, in regards to news and social media, those things that are trying to influence the way that we think, feel, and behave, as opposed to that negative manipulation or that dangerous manipulation, which puts us in a place that we feel unsafe or uncomfortable in. So we started off by looking specifically at narcissism, and we chose this for a couple of reasons. One is it's a fascinating subject, and society has got a lot of fascination in narcissism. What's a narcissist? What do narcissists do? Do I have narcissism? Does my boss have narcissism? All these different things. It's a very fascinating subject. And because someone who is either a narcissist themselves or has narcissistic traits can be the sort of person that will try to manipulate us as well, or manipulate the relationships they're in as well. So I just want to predicate, like we did all this month, so obviously it's very relevant in the wrap-up as well, that this had nothing to do with getting you or helping you to diagnose or label people. And sorry, I'll also mention we didn't want you to be trying to change people either. We've got to let people be who they are. But what we're really hoping for you to achieve through your engagement with our content was an internal reflection. So am I being manipulated in certain contexts? Or am I also even manipulating others in certain contexts? So that we can bring wisdom into how we are behaving and how we are responding to different relationships as well. How we can retake power, how we can cut off and disconnect from relationships where that's simply not going to be possible, and how we can also help manage relationships where we're dealing with someone that wants to have the power, that wants to be the person, and how do we interact with that person in a constructive, in a collaborative, and in an effective manner when we're looking at work as well. Because like we said, we're not about changing people, it's about working effectively with them and upholding our values, knowing when we may need to disconnect if it comes to that point as well. So the other thing to look at is that narcissism becomes a disorder or a problem when it causes dysfunction in the person's life or causes them distress. Now, the challenge with narcissism in looking at dysfunction is that a narcissist is not probably going to be the person that sees the dysfunction in their lifestyle. They're probably going to see that as the result or cause of fallibilities in others or circumstances outside of their control. So it's often others that first recognize narcissistic traits in someone else or traits of narcissism. The most important thing to remember, though, is that narcissism as a disorder is very rare in society. There's no exact figure, but it's somewhere between 0 and 6% of the community will experience a narcissistic disorder, and somewhere between 50 to 75% of individuals with narcissism are male. So that could literally be wide open to saying it's an even split between genders, the binary genders, or it is more of a male dominated disorder as well. It's more research needs to happen fundamentally. But remembering that and coming back to and focusing back on the topic, there is narcissism, where it's a full-blown disorder, and then there's narcissistic traits, where it's just things that you may encounter more frequently. So just because you've got grandiose perceptions of yourself or maybe an inflated ego doesn't make you a narcissist. Also, in that maybe just if someone experiences envy at other people's success doesn't necessarily make them a narcissist. It could be a narcissistic trait, something that they're just incorporated into their personality, but it doesn't mean they're a narcissist. So we've got to be really careful in labeling people as well. What we're more looking at, what we're looking through with this content this month was how do we respond to that trait? Particularly in the workplace. If we know someone's got an inflated ego, if we know that someone envies other success, if we know that people have got grandiose perceptions about their capabilities, their status, etc., how do we respond to that so that we can continue to try and work effectively with that person, so long as it's not putting us in danger or disadvantaging us too much? Where we started was understanding what these traits are, how to recognize them, as I've been going on a little bit, how to respond to them, and importantly, what to do if you feel like these traits exist within yourself. So I mentioned this before, but what I want to reiterate again right now is that it's not just, hey, this person is a narcissist or this person's got these traits. We can be fallible ourselves too. And sometimes we may have a grandiose perception of ourselves. Maybe we become the victim of an inflated ego. And I'm sure all of us at some point have envied the success of colleagues, of others, of peers, of our partners, etc. as well. So how do we handle that and move through it so it doesn't become a permanent feature of our personality? And there's really interesting reading in there as well in that first blog that Claire wrote. And I encourage you all to go back through it. And, if you do recognize it in yourself, that's okay. There's ways of assessing for it. There are also ways of treating it as well. So be cognizant of that. Recognize and take on board what the things Claire said around how you interact with someone that might be housing narcissistic traits, and prior preparation is a key to that. Also making sure you're setting realistic goals and expectations of the conversations that you'll have with that person. If someone is highly inflated on their ego, expect that your conversations with them are probably going to be pretty shallow and are not going to be deep and meaningful. Probably not going to gain much yourself out of that relationship or conversation. So don't expect that from it. Because if you go in there expecting it, you're going to end up disappointed. And in a work setting, that can create a disconnect in the partnership, might make you ineffective as well. And again, we're looking at how we can remain effective, safe, and engaged, personally and with work. We then looked more at our personal relationships, what constitutes power within personal relationships and what constitutes balance. And this was the blog that Rakia wrote around should anyone wear the pants, which is a bit of a twist and I suppose a modern concept of the age-old question of who does wear the pants. And we explain that really there's not a need for someone to wear the pants in a relationship, in a personal relationship. It's really ensuring that it is in balance and what that balance means for each individual within that relationship. And fundamentally, a balanced relationship is when a relationship is built on these three things, being respect. There is respect given and felt by both parties. There is independence. So although we are engaged in a relationship, we are able to be independent in that relationship as well. We are not one, we are not controlled by either. We have our personal pursuits and our relationship-based pursuits, and they are celebrated and encouraged. And of course, that both parties feel like they are treated and are treating the other with integrity. So a balanced relationship is when both parties feel that these things have been achieved and are present as well. So the key there is not just your own internal perception of how the relationship is on those three factors, but how's the other person feeling as well? Are they also feeling that as well? And it's important to check in there as well, particularly not only if you're feeling like you're not treated with respect, you don't have independence, or you're not being treated with integrity, but also to ensure that you're providing those things to the other person. It is balanced if both partners feel this, and also if when neither partner is trying to take them away from the other person. And this is where it can start to become transition from a subconscious or subliminal imbalance to a conscious imbalance. And that might be when narcissism starts to creep back into our personal relationships, or starts to become relevant, to our personal relationships as well. So someone can try and take those three things away from us in a relationship. And that's what we just want to be careful for as well. It's also important to note that us as observers of other relationships, that those three things can look very different to different people. But a behavior of respect could look very different to one person as it would to another. Being treated with integrity and what integrity is could mean one thing to one person and another to another. And it's impacted by our personal preferences, how we like to feel and see respect. Where does that play out? But also cultural norms as well play a big impact on how a person views respect, integrity, and independence. So even if a relationship that you're not directly involved in appears imbalanced, it is still not necessarily your responsibility to intervene if the people in that relationship feel that they've both been treated with respect, with integrity, and have independence, and then that's not been trying to be taken away from them by the other person as well. And you getting involved in that relationship because it's not your version of respect, your version of integrity, or your version of independence is actually you trying to manipulate someone else as well, trying to put your values, your preferences onto someone else as well. So when we're supporting friends or colleagues in relationships that they're in that may not be directly related to us, it's not personally how we view that, unless we're specifically asked for that opinion. It's making sure that we're supporting the individual in how they're feeling and how they see those three key areas as well. Are they feeling respected? Are they feeling independent? Are they feeling like they're being treated with integrity? And if they are, horses for courses. That is where you need to make sure that just because it's not your flavor, that we're not putting our own opinion on that and trying to manipulate someone into feeling or thinking that it is imbalanced in a way. Then we moved on to the concept of specifically looking at possessiveness. We look at that balanced relationship, particularly at independence. Yeah. So where someone is being possessive of someone else in a relationship, they're trying to take that level of independence away. We started by looking at where possessiveness might come from as well. It's early warning signs and what to do. So as you probably would have picked up through listening to these webinars over the series of months, whenever we're talking about something, we always talk about what could be its trigger, what are the early warning signs, and then what are the actions we can take. Every single topic. So of course we did that with possessiveness as well. And with possessiveness, it can be difficult to recognize it early on in a relationship. If we look at our intimate or romantic relationships in particular, possessiveness can look like wanting to develop it very quickly. And it can be hard to look at because we can feel the excitement and that we can feel, and it can be great to feel like someone wants to develop this great relationship with us really quickly. So possessiveness can be a little bit murky to recognize early on in the beginning. The key to avoiding that trap in particular for possessiveness is to, before entering into a romantic relationship with someone, before entering into an intimate relationship or any sort of relationship that's going to have a major role in your life, having a strong sense of your own personal self and values first, so you can always reflect on how that relationship is traveling in regards to meeting your needs and meeting your wants and your expectations, not just someone else as well. Making sure that we're just taking a moment to check out from the emotion and excitement of a new relationship, to just check and make sure we feel comfortable in how quickly it is developing, how quickly the connection is being developed. Are we comfortable with that? These values and sense of self provide an anchor of how we want the relationship to progress. So we're not just being swept up in helping the other person feel comfortable or ourselves feel comfortable, how we want it to feel progress and what we need in regards to connection and space as well. So protecting that independence from the beginning and not being swept up, as I keep mentioning, in the emotion and excitement of that new Hollywood feeling of a relationship and foregoing our independence, because that boundary needs to be set early. It's much easier to set a boundary at the beginning than to form a boundary halfway into a relationship. The other reflection point that I wanted to bring up and that I took away from this piece of content, the blog, how possessiveness can start, and recognizing that we ourselves may become possessive if there is challenges or losses in other areas of our life as well. So sometimes possessive is a conscious effort to manipulate someone. Sometimes possessiveness can be a seeking for stability because the rest of our lives are in turmoil as well. And that can obviously be in relation to the other person, if they're becoming possessive, but obviously also for us. And one thing that Mitch brought up in this blog that was an identifier of this was if there's a social breakdown, so if you've got a social connection, a social group independent from your intimate relationship, and there's a breakdown there and you lose a sense of security in that group of relationships, you can then become possessive of this relationship because you want to make sure that they don't leave you as well, that you're feeling love, that you're getting your needs and wants met. And that could obviously happen the other way around if it's us. That's happened too. So sometimes possessiveness can be a narcissistic trait. Sometimes possessiveness can be a conscious effort to manipulate someone and trap someone. But then also it can also be an indicator of something else happening in their lives or our lives as well. And we want to be conscious of that so we can help the person through it. And so we don't develop this trap or continuous circle of possessiveness as well. Of course, if it is just an innate part of someone's personality, then, that becomes a bigger question in regards to the validity and necessity of that relationship in your life. And then finally, we specifically looked at manipulation. Yeah, so we had possessive, which was that manipulation of sort of taking independence away, and then manipulation now looking at it more broadly in the context of infiltrating and changing the way someone feels, thinks, and behaves for the benefit of the manipulator as well. As I highlighted earlier on, we're all manipulated on a daily basis. You've probably manipulated more times in a day than you drink a sip of water or go to the bathroom. And that is because we are consistently bombarded with ads, news, social media. I'm trying to manipulate you now by telling you this is the way that manipulation is. So there is what you deem, in a way, harmless manipulation, which is more about those things where someone's trying to sell you something and not necessarily bring harm to you or control you in a significant manner. They're trying to sell you a knife set or they're trying to sell you a different type of lettuce. Manipulation obviously can cross this harmless line when it looks to limit your confidence in your decision making or who you are and what your values stand for, significantly adapt your behavior, who you socialize with, what you are doing with your time, not being independent, and put you ultimately in a psychologically, physically, or emotionally dangerous situation or position. This is when manipulation can become a serious issue and something that you need to be addressing. So again, looking at that, am I feeling psychologically, emotionally, or physically safe in the relationship I'm in? Or am I feeling like I need to change myself, my thoughts, my opinions, my behavior to appease someone else? And that can be that key indicator when you may be starting to get manipulated. You're changing who you are and what you hold important and how you make decisions, interpret different data points around you in your life to appease someone else rather than to help you thrive and flourish as who you are as a person. If you recognize this within yourself and relationships you have, it's important to remember that there are organizations and programs out there to support you. It's not something you need to work through or overcome independently as well. And some of the key organizations or programs in this area is 1-800-RESPECT, Lifeline. Your EAP provider, such as Veritas, can also provide you some support. And of course, if you're really concerned for safety, etc., then police can also be an option there as well. It's about having a think independently for yourself about which avenue you think is most appropriate, and it's going to help you remain safe through that. And obviously, with manipulation, like with everything, it's easier to resolve, for lack of a better word, or to change or to remove yourself from if actioned on and recognized early. So again, if you feel like you're consistently making excuses for someone else's behavior, intention, or language, that can be a bit of a sign that you're starting to become manipulated or forgo yourself to appease that person as well. And that is where you really want to be starting to set strong boundaries, really start to be feeling and thinking about that relationship and what role it plays and what your options are from there. And that's the wrap up for the month. I thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure hosting this again. You know, when it comes to manipulation, when it comes back to taking control, it's all about awareness. It's all about remembering those three key pillars to a relationship of respect, integrity, and independence. Remembering that narcissism as a disorder is not very common. And just because someone's got an ego, just because someone's grandiose, maybe just because someone has a high level of envy, doesn't make them necessarily a narcissist, but it is a narcissistic trait. And that can impact the way that you work, behave, and relate to that person as well. And you want to be not looking to change that person if they're not bringing specific harm to anyone else, but how you can relate to that person, understanding that's part of who they are, what your goal of that relationship is, and how you can manage that relationship to keep achieving that goal for yourself. And of course, the difficult question that people always hate the psychologist asking is, do you recognize any of this in yourself? Do you see where you might be trying to manipulate someone? Do you see where you may be vulnerable to envy or vulnerable to ego, or where you may lose a sense of attachment to reality in regards to your ego? And they're personal growth factors to work through as well. So again, to wrap up for a second time, remember that it's about how you relate in your relationships, but also self-awareness as well when it looks at taking back power. Because if you're driven by ego, driven by grandiosity, driven by envy, then you're not driving your own ship in your life. You're making decisions based on things which aren't real or on the actions of others, and that's not taking control. But thank you very much for listening. I look forward to seeing you at the end of May. I hope you have a terrific month, and I'll speak to you next time. Thank you.